All right, Antique Bible reading number 10. We are still in the Gallery of Scripture Illustrations. And this one is the birth of St. John. This one is the angel announces the birth of Christ. This one, I already showed that one. This one is the birth of Christ. Slaughter the innocents. Joseph commanded to flee into Egypt. The flight into Egypt. One of the purposes of the icons is they tell the story of the Bible to illiterates. So people who can't read, the icons would tell the story a lot of times. This is presentation in the temple. Sorry, some of this ink is not on there very well. Christ teaches in the temple. Christ teaches Nicodemus. Sending forth the 12 apostles. Christ feeding the 5,000. Suffer little children to come unto me. It's one of my favorites. In the tradition of the church, the one that was sitting on his lap that St. Peter, I think it was, told him, to get away, was St. Ignatius, who was later fed to the lions as a martyr by the Romans. The Good Samaritan, Christ and the woman of Samaria, Jesus drives out the money changers. What does that say? Oh, the adulteress taken before Christ. I'm sorry, some of the ink was missing. Christ raises the daughter of Jairus. Christ raises the widow's son. Jesus supports the sinking Peter. There's so many lessons in these stories. The return of the prodigal son. Death of John the Baptist. Christ's entry into Jerusalem. Mary Magdalene anoints the head of Christ. Christ washes his disciples' feet. In the life of the Orthodox Church, every year, these are feasts, and we relive the Bible every year in church and the readings. In fact, I was going to read this just cover to cover, but I think first I'm going to read it according to the Orthodox tradition, and then I'll go back and try to read it cover for cover if I have time. The end of Judas Iscariot. Sorry about the shadow here. I'll try not to do that. Christ falls under the cross. The end of Judas Iscariot. Christ, I already did that one. The crucifixion. The burial of Christ. Ideally, when you're teaching people about Christianity, it's better to start with the lives of the saints and their examples, and then include the Bible as you go. Because I remember when I was a Protestant, I felt there was such a huge gap from the time of Christ to the present day that it felt somewhat disconnected. But when you trace the bishops and the apostles, disciples and saints all the way from the time of Christ to the present, and then you can go back and trace it from the time of Christ back to Adam and Eve, it's all connected. It's all one. And you don't feel that disconnect. You feel very connected because, in fact, there's so much symbolism and significance in all the prayers and the services and the lives of the saints and the teachings of the church. You can't really separate the Bible from the church or the interpretation of the Bible, because that's how you end up with heresies and, false teachings. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that today. I highly recommend that you check into the book called Dancing Alone by Frank Schaeffer. His father was a famous Protestant preacher, and he goes into great historical depth into all that. Alright, who's this character? Ulrich Zwingli. Oh, okay. German Reverend. I remember reading about these guys. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I don't want to get too long on these. I want to keep them short. Say your prayers. God bless. Over and out.